Okay, welcome to the Enterprise Agile Global Community Meetup. We started out as Enterprise, actually we started out with an entirely different name. We changed our name to Enterprise Agile and became the Enterprise Agile Global Community when the pandemic began. And we discovered all of these people, all of you who are arriving from places like Australia, Hawaii, and Europe, and the East Coast were joining us, as well as people in San Francisco, and our co-chairs began moving out from San Francisco. So I'm calling in from Seattle at the moment, and Mary, co-chair Mary, raise your hand, Mary, wave. Mary is here from just north of San Diego. Rob's in the Bay Area, and Gopal is in the Bay Area, I think. And we all welcome you and welcome volunteers to join us in organizing these things. We were monthly, we're now bi-monthly, and looking at putting on our next talk in January. We'll skip December. So we're off in January for our next one, and that will be Lance. I can't say Lance's last name, but he's got a really interesting presentation that I've seen at a local meetup in Seattle, and I think you'll find it very interesting. It's already described and on the Enterprise Agile Meetup page. So if you're interested in that, sign up for it. And we've got Johanna Rothman coming in March, and Gopal, who we got coming in May.
We have Jason Little talking about change management in May.
Yeah, so we've got some interesting programs coming up. Tonight we have Joe Kennedy, whose presentation on story mapping I heard in the Portland Agile group, and thought, wow, this is really good. And furthermore, I don't know the size of Joe's current job, his current company that he works for, but he's worked for Intel, so he's done some pretty significant enterprise kinds of things, and he brings that to us. And I thought, wow, this would be a really great presentation to have for this meetup. And so I think with that, I'll let you do whatever additional introduction of yourself you want to do, Joe, and turn it over to you. Anything else from my co-chairs that we need to say before we get started? All right, Joe, it's all yours.
Oh, thanks, Ron. So yeah, a bit of the bio. My bachelor's degree is in physics, of all things, and I haven't used it except to teach high school for a couple of years. As Ron said, I was at Intel. I was there for about 20 odd years, and given the news the past few weeks, I'm glad I'm not. I left Intel and moved over to a smaller company called Higher Logic that's based out of Arlington, Virginia. So I went from about 110,000 people to about 350 individuals. And I was there for a few years. That they did a round of layoffs, and then right now I'm on campus at Nike, working as a Scrum Master and working with my boss to do a few other things that are a little bit above that role. In that time at Intel, I know I was a little disappointed about that, Gopal. In my time at Intel, probably about halfway through, so early 2000s, the groups that I was with started exploring extreme programming, agile adoption, things like that. It was really a rogue exercise. We were really working under the radar. We actually found the back room of a semi-abandoned building to set up our own little bullpen to start working on some of our projects together. But through, with Agile, Scrum, XP, whatever we could scrounge together, we built up the content management system for support, the support.intel.com domain. Within a few months of development, we built in a complicated 4-stage workflow. We imported well over 120,000 HTML documents to go into this content management system. And that system was in place for another 12 years, I think. One of the later things I worked on, I worked with the group that calculated quarterly earnings for Intel, the numbers that went directly to the CEO in Wall Street. And we were working on a quarterly basis. We would wrap up the close process. We would sit down after a week of rest and then figure out what we're going to do that quarter. So plot things out, because we had, let's say it's January 3rd, we just finished year end and quarter close. We would have to know we would try to figure out what was going to be in place by the end of March, the end of the next quarter. So we would work with our stakeholders, plot things out, and do things like user story mapping to try and figure out, once we've got the priorities, how it's going to look for them, or how it's going to appear to the users. So yeah, I'm certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum Professional, Agile Coach, Agile Facilitator. There's a few other acronyms up there. So with that, just very quick, any other questions or clarifications that I can offer? Okay. I tend to, as a presenter, I don't have a certification in this. I'm just practiced in it. I tend to also favor the Feynman technique when it comes to improving. So picking a topic and learning about it, teaching it, and then building on my knowledge and skill gaps from there. So what I might speak about might not be perfect. It might not be directly against what Jeff Patton or David Hussman would have said, but I roll with it and we figure it out. So looking at the quick intro questions, it looks like some of you have used your user story mapping before. And I like the comment, you still get stuck in waterfall, a lot of you. Well familiar with that pitfall. Yeah, I'm not a graphic designer. I just tend to go with the basics. User story mapping, it's a facilitated visualization of the user's journey through the product. So if you're in a group that tends to start getting into architecture discussions or putting up technical stories, trying to get those types of things on the board, you're already out of the right lane. What goes up on the board is supposed to be the user's experience and the user's perspective. Those other elements can come later. You might have to do some rebalancing if you found out that you're on an old version of SQL, or your code repos just out of whack or something like that. So those things can come up later, but really at this part of the exercise, it is about what the user sees and does. We've got the book User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton down in the bottom right. That's David Hussman. If you've ever used the web app Cardboard It, David Hussman took his knowledge and expertise in user story mapping to build up that app. That's why that app is so good for user story mapping. He's also got some great videos. I think they're finding their way onto YouTube. Most of them have been up on Vimeo for a while, but it's just a great low-key video if you're looking for something to refer to later after this. What do we need as prerequisites? We need some personas. So we need to know who is going to be using it. And it's really great to go through the persona creation exercises. So you give the person the role, you give them some personality characteristics. Just so, if you've got some people who want to put themselves in those shoes, can have a framework that they can work from. Ideally, you have an outcome to achieve, not it, but sometimes you might just be free forming it, which is okay. An understanding of vertical versus horizontal slicing of your work. Again, that's just foundational to me. Horizontal, a bit of a background, you spend however long it takes to understand the complete scope of the project from beginning to end. Then you design the bottom layer, basically the architecture, the database layers, and you work your way up through the business logic layers, all through the UI. That's your waterfall experience. That's your big bang release. So learning how to differentiate vertical slices, basically what we try to do in Scrum, we get that working increment every sprint. We build enough of each of those layers to get the next increment out. That is, again, that's part of the way, one of the ways to curtail those big architecture discussions in the middle of the exercise. Kind of keep things in the now, next, later frame of mind. Again, you might have senior developers or analysts that are going to try to build your entire backlog right away. Again, keeping your stories and keeping your releases in the now, next, later framework, because ideally, or quite potentially, your first release is going to result in changes to your plan. So you don't want, again, foundationally to Agile, you don't want to have to waste all that time on story writing on things that aren't going to get built. It's good to have an understanding of the MVP process and the Pareto principle. Pareto, 80% of your value comes from 20% of your work. You have a lot of managers, release managers, and directors who for that 20% of work and their 80% of the value, they still want to wait for a finished product. So if you can get that 80% value, get rid of that cost, reduce that cost of delay. That's, again, part of the advantage here. And then also MVP, and I consider two definitions of MVP. There's the minimum viable product, which is the common acronym. What's the smallest increment that can survive on its own when it's released? There's also the minimum valuable product. What's the smallest increment that can provide value in the user's hands? They probably run very similar, but depending on how you're breaking your work down, there'll probably be some deviations, and it depends on what your objective is. If your first objective is feedback, the minimum viable product is good. If you're looking to get value into users' hands, you want the minimum valuable product, which might require a little bit more on the feature set to go out. And then making tough calls for your release strategy. Part of user story mapping is not just building up the board of all of these user capabilities. You start swim laning into different releases, and you might have to make some tough calls, again, going into those viable or valuable products, or if you're going into some other kind of release strategy. So just being able to make some of those calls about what goes up and or above and below those lines. Questions? And please don't hesitate to toss out a question. If you're going to type it in the board, go ahead and preface it with the Q, just so that it can easily be identified as a question rather than a comment. And so what are the key activities? It's brainstorming on user actions. You might create a distinct user story map for each of the different personae, because what a editor might do is going to be different than what a writer might do in a content system, for example. So you might want to consider those differences and then create a strategy about how to get your minimum release that considers both of those different roles. You might be creating the backbone, and we'll see a picture of what that looks like in a little bit. But basically, when you're creating the user story map, the backbone is basically your epic strategy. So your epics are going to, if you're like looking at Amazon, the backbone, the epics might be the shopping cart, the return policy process, the search functionality. Those are probably going to be your epics. And we all know sometimes epics get so big, you start looking, depending on your hierarchy, you might start looking at themes and initiatives and whatnot. And those can, that can happen in this process if you're looking at something big enough. You might just see something getting so overwhelming, it's not going to happen in a quarter. It might, that whole encompassing value of user features might be a year's worth of work. So you might start to see those epics and those themes kind of differentiate themselves. Your audience should be more than just the core team of the developers. You can have users, you can have stakeholders, you can have people from sales, you can have people from support or implementations or integrations, people that have, by one way or another, their fingers in the pot, because they're going to have insights. Support, if you have working on a product in an established company, support's going to know about some of the pitfalls that they've experienced on the platform. So their input is going to be pretty good. And when you start getting those multiple perspectives, it might help you with those 5 whys. If you're going that deep into the analysis at the time. Are you addressing a symptom, or are you fixing a problem? Things like that. And then if you have a pretty broad brainstorming board, if you've ended up with a bunch of stuff, you might just do some affinity mapping. If you happen to be on a real wall, people are just grabbing the stickies and putting similar things together. And those would kind of fall under those different epic buckets, or they might identify different epics that need to go up as well. And then some possible future actions. You'll start creating your backlog. You might have some discussions with sales and marketing if they weren't part of this, because they're going to have a perspective on what they want to see go out. So there might be some negotiation there. You might do a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to see if there's going to be any impacts from there, or just something that you need to consider for your release strategy. And then you start going to your engineers as well. Just, how are we going to do this? Are we going to have to re-architect something or re-platform something, or is this going to be a new language for us, or what have you? Okay. When we're generally, when you are kind of have your own discretion up on the board, this is basic. This frame up on the board is just like a parking lot. If you have any questions or any comments you want to toss out for future reference, you can go ahead and throw a sticky up there on those on that board, on that frame. And let's see if I can make sure I think that was it. Okay. Zooming out here a little bit. Yeah, that was it. Any questions so far? Okay. So what I've done is and I'm going to drop out of presentation mode, and I'm going to actually.
I do have a quick question. Sorry, I was trying to get back to the screen. I've only done story mappings a couple of times in my career, and it was over the course of like 3 or 4 days. I'm curious, in your experience, what that span has looked like, that initial flurry of activity.
Actually, most of my experience is cranking stuff out in an afternoon.
Okay.
That again, I don't necessarily see a right or a wrong one, but if you look at the comic that I have down there at the bottom left, the comic Agile, one of those comics, I've been in a analysis session that resulted in a board that big. So I can see it going really, getting your board really overwhelming. To me, here's my gut impression. You might have gone too far and gone down the foxhole a little bit too deep, because again, 4 days of work is going to be huge. And are you really going to be getting all of those items down at the bottom?
It's good to time box.
Thank you. You'd be even at Nike, I still have to have that bring that reminder up. All right, okay. So the example that
sorry, even at Nike or especially at Nike?
Little column A, little column B. The example that Ron in the workshop we did a few months ago that Ron attended, This is one of the common teaching examples that I probably 8 or 9 years ago I first saw, and I'll bring everybody up to me if I can remember where. There it is. So I used AI to create 5 different persona. It was that was an interesting exercise by itself. You used AI to create the background and the personality, and using different AI to create the pictures of them. But the example that I've usually used to teach and present this is, you're waking up in the morning, your alarm clock has just gone off. What do you have to do to get out of the door and on your way to work? And what we could do is, maybe if we're comfortable kind of doing one on our as a group a little bit. Here, the first assumption is you didn't hit snooze, you up and out of bed right away, and you can get everything done that you need to in the morning. So assuming that, what does that start to look like? What are again, we're looking from a task focus. So you're going to brush your teeth. We're not going to say we need to go make sure that we have toothpaste, and if we don't have toothpaste, we have to go to the store. That's an analogy of a technical discussion. We're just going to assume the toothpaste is there. So we could do that, and maybe we could do a role if there's a persona that calls out to somebody, that helps frame some of the discussion. But if somebody wants to do that, or I have a bunch of 20-sided die around here somewhere, I can roll one of those. You can assume the worst for how many 20-sided die I have.
Sorry, I
Okay,
might have missed the question.
Well, so in order to start the discussion, and my thought is we can, because I have several, I shouldn't say several, I have 3 or 4 other examples where we can walk through and maybe do a couple of group breakouts. But just to kind of start to see how the approach proceeds, if we wanted to pick a persona and start imagining what that person is going to be doing first thing in the morning. So I don't know if somebody has a persona that really calls out to them.
Yeah, anybody? Any personas or persona?
I'll get my die. I think I have them.
You really have to zoom in on those personas to look at them.
Yeah. So
Maria looks interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, we could do Maria. Okay. So if we take a look at Maria, she's an active retiree. She's 65, widowed. Her education level is high school diploma. She works in an independent living retirement community. And then there's a list of some of her hobbies and her interests. So not necessarily getting up to go to work, but let's say that there's a field trip that day at the community. So she's up in time to be able to get up, get ready, and head out to the bus for the trip. Maybe it's a casino trip, something like that. You know how those. Well, I shouldn't call them old because there is a lot of white here, but older than me. So let's put ourselves in Maria's shoes for a little bit. Question? Okay. So imagining that you're Maria for a moment. If you go down to the bottom, the black field right below that, where the goal is, originally the goal was to get out and go to work, but now Maria's going on that field trip. You can use the blue stickies and start tossing up your ideas of what Maria has to do. She's going to get dressed. Is she going to take a shower? She's going to brush her teeth, go to the bathroom, have breakfast. Does she exercise? Does she have a dog? Have at it. Just go ahead and toss your ideas up Don't worry about duplication. We can identify those when we do the affinity mapping. Just go ahead and whatever thoughts come to mind for you. I'll just put a timer of 90 seconds up just to time box it. If the music's coming through, the title of this music is Sunshine Jam. I thought it was a Okay. So as we're looking at this now, and if you still have a few ideas, you can kind of toss them up there, but kind of think of these again as those key epic level activities. There's getting clean, getting dressed, eating, and heading and getting to the door. So there might be a few other things up there, and some of those other epic identifiers might come about from the affinity mapping that we do. So go ahead, just be nice to each other. But if you start seeing some similar activities, go ahead and start moving them together. Okay, so kind of looking at these, we've got getting clean. We've got some activity items, like there's the exercise, the yoga, the journaling, or the reading. There's the eating part of it. There's coffee, breakfast. Some people take their meds in the bathroom. Some people take their meds in the kitchen. Who can say? They're both right. There's getting dressed. And it makes sense that the packing the spare set of clothes is going to happen when they're getting dressed because they're right there. And it looks like the two little groups down at the bottom are really about logistical things. Do I have everything? Have I done everything? So taking that and moving over here to the right, if you're not familiar with Miro, the V and the H keys are two of your best hotkeys. V gives you the cursor to select, and H gives you the hand to move the board up and down, left and right. H is your Etch-a-Sketch key. So here we can just kind of fill in those epics. We've got, what did we say here? Activities. Got bathing, cleaning, dressing. And then there's a one of them is packing up, and I'll call the next one locking up. Okay. So ignoring the horizontal line and the release one MVP tag, just start bringing those items over and putting them in the right column, and putting them in what you think is the right column. And if you disagree, go ahead and move it. Sometimes in a real product focused environment, when you have that kind of group think activity and and you get that disagreement about where something should be, it should prompt a discussion. So disagreement's okay. Again, it prompts that conversation.
Yeah, I think we're missing a column. The column I would add would be eating, drinking,
Oh, did I completely miss that? You're right.
coffee, lunch,
That
breakfast, sorry.
that's why you don't do these things alone.
Consuming.
Wisdom of the crowd. Getting up in the morning is a team sport.
When my kids were younger, yes, it was. Actually, that was more adversarial than team. And I can see that some people make the comment, a mistake that I do commonly. Sometimes you have to click in the background before you can hit H. Where your cursor has focused it just needs to be in the right place to hit H. If it's in a sticky, it's going to type the H. Okay, I think that's just about everything. So ignoring that release line there across the middle, Maria was able to get all of this done. She got up, she did everything that she needed to do. Now, when we start talking about that horizontal line, that's when we start getting to the fine tuning of our minimum release. So instead of having all of that time, let's imagine that she hit the snooze button a couple of times. She's got 30 minutes to get out of the door. So what starts to move down below that line if you're hurting for time?
Yeah.
So if there's something below the line that needs to move up, go ahead in your mind. If there's something above the line, move it down. So there's going to be a little bit of shifting up and down, but you've got 30 minutes to get up and out of the door. What activities do you start shoving aside? And feel free, you can look through the list and see if there's anything you really want to move. You know, I'm going to disagree with whoever moved has her keys down below the line. If I've got 30 minutes, I think I've got time to grab my keys. Or it could be like my house here where I've got a keypad on my garage. I don't need my keys. Oh, I see. Well, yeah, the keys was pretty much a duplicate. We can, when we have a duplicate, something like that, we can really just kind of move it over to the side. Okay. So you start to see how those activities differentiate based on the urgency. And the last part of this exercise is you slept through your alarm. It didn't matter about the snooze button. Somebody just called you to wake you up, and the bus is about to leave. So Maria yells, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." What does Maria do to get down there in 5 minutes?
And so now we're moving them again.
Yes. Yeah. Anything that is out of scope for that 5 minutes goes below the line. Yeah, I mean, you can negotiate the feed your pets. Maybe you can call your neighbor from the bus and just have them walk over. Hopefully they have, there's somebody there with a spare key. Yeah, showering is one of those things that becomes optional. Brushing your teeth, maybe you've got some gum in your purse.
No
I see
way.
how. But again, there's no right or wrong here, but this is your MVP.
Your teeth
And
will
then
if you brush them.
So this is your MVP, and then directors and vice presidents, being who they are, they're going to want to know what what it looks like for those future releases, so you can create a release 2 and a release 3 using the same type of prioritization, and always with the caveat that it's speculative. We're not going to do the detailed data design and analysis of all of these things. We're going to wait until we know we need them. We're going to get our MVP out and see where our feedback takes us. But you can create that plan. The plan is a living document. It's not a roadmap, it's a plan. Okay. Granted, that was what, about half an hour, 45 minutes on something that wasn't really real. But you can see how it kind of goes. So from here, well, first of all, let me ask any questions, any clarifications, anything that just wasn't clear at all?
So, Joe, when you're extending this concept of all the time in the world, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, when you're extending this concept to a real product, what kind of limits are you setting, saying, as you're trying to map this to getting products out this month, this quarter, or whatever? What does that look like when you extend that concept?
Well, ideally, somebody somewhere has an idea of what the outcome should be. Are we focused on adding features? Are we focused on increasing user adoption? Are we focused strictly on dollars? So however that prioritization and discussion process goes, to me, that's the first set of criteria. And then once you have that outcome identified, whether it be by dictate or by empirical analysis, what are the features that are going to get us there? Brainstorming, and then from there, what little experiments do we need to run to try to do that? And then those are the things that start going up on the board, using something like, what would be a good example in my mind right now? Using something like Word. Again, Microsoft Word is one of those examples that come up in some of these scope and feature discussions. Microsoft Word is well over-engineered for 95% of the population.
Yep.
So if we go back to, what was it? What was one of the old, Write? Microsoft Write was the older app. So if we want to we don't want to go as far as Microsoft Word, but we want to maybe kind of build up on Microsoft Write a little bit. What do we, whose life are we trying to make easier? What are some ideas to do that? What's our KPI or our OCR, or OKR? And how do we know? And how do we know that we've achieved it? But we start building up the backlog focus on that. So whether we're doing it by the very, very common and all too common method of just throwing stuff up and assuming that it's all going to work, or if we're doing it by, little failures and experimentation to guide us there one way or the other. But that backlog is going to build up to hopefully to get there. So if you're looking at Microsoft Write, are you going to need to have a good proofreading feature set? Are you going to have, how many past versions are you going to, for version control are you going to keep? Who are you trying to help, and how, and what features do we need to help them?
Well, I definitely like the exercise of, okay, let's look at the real world, and what you thought was going to prototype out pretty well turned out, oh no, we're going to have to build out a lot more. It's going to take a lot more time, et cetera, to do this. Where else do we cut if we're going to try to keep something like the ship date we had before, and so forth? I think it's a great exercise to do a little bit of that ahead of time. You don't want to spend huge amounts of time, but thinking about your contingencies ahead of time can be a real helpful thing.
Right. And so once you start getting everything up on the board, those contingencies become part of the after discussion. What is firm in scope? What's flexible? Where are we on, it's not necessarily the iron triangle. It's more like the iron tetrahedron. So where do you have that flexibility, and is it scope? Is it money? Is it, things like that? It
doesn't always have to be depressing. Some of it can be, what are we going to pull in and add to this if we find out this was easier than we thought?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? Okay. So in my mind, there's a couple of different ways we can do it. Everybody's either found this completely fulfilling and they've got a pretty good understanding, or below, I've got a couple of other examples of a similar type of exercise, not software related. It's more, activity based. So you can scroll down and see what they are, but I'm just curious to see how people are feeling. What kind of do we want to try another activity as a group, or do we want to break out into maybe looking at what we've got, 70 people, maybe 2 different groups?
I think it was fun as a group.
I'm fine with a single group. We have some who aren't very active anyway, so the group looks like it.
Yeah, for single group too.
Okay. Well, we've got planning a party, planning a wedding, and planning a camp out.
Planning a wedding.
Any other? Is everybody good with that one, or do we want to?
Yeah, I like that one.
Okay. So we scroll down to, yep. So I think it's the 3rd one down. You can just scroll straight down. Everything should be in a vertical line.
So I just rejoined because of my internet connection. So I lost the link in the chat. Can anyone please add the link in the chat for me to vote? I couldn't find it. Thank you.
Getting hitched.
Okay. So again, which persona do we want to go for? Because one of them is trying to be an influencer, and some of them are much more low key. And I think the influencer's wedding is going to be a lot different than some of the others.
Yeah, that's going to be a project.
Yeah, I like low key.
I can't see the influencer not having her very own strong ideas of what this wedding ought to look like.
Oh yeah.
When I was
going to be amazing.
Yeah, when I was creating the different complexity increments, the first one I said was the Kardashian is showing up. It pretty much meant the same thing. So somebody who hasn't made a decision yet, what do you think?
Well, if we exclude the first 3, the only options we're left with are Sarah and John.
Let's do John this time. Okay. So John is the eco-conscious student. He's 22 years old. Single at the moment. That's about to change. Senior in college. So he's proposed to his partner, and after graduation, they're going to have an event. At the moment, he's in a shared student apartment, and he's got hobbies like hiking, camping. Obviously, he likes plants by his picture. and cares about environmental issues, uses technology to stay informed about sustainability and support eco-friendly initiatives, prioritizes apps that promote sustainable living, and connect him with like-minded people. So we can read a lot into that. He's really, this isn't going to be a 4-course dinner. This probably isn't going to be a tuxedo and a very fine white satin dress.
It's in the woods.
Could be. So very similar to before, keeping John in mind. Down at the bottom left, and we can imagine a lot of different things, so we don't have to call each other wrong, but what kind of a wedding and what are the key steps that to reach that wedding is John going to be planning out? And similar to what we did with Maria, the first is, everything is possible. It's very large number of guests, probably 8 people in the wedding party, because he's got, if you have a really strong group of friends, you probably have a really big wedding party. So maybe it's a bit too much for John since he's an environmentalist, but let's frame it that way. It's a huge wedding, a couple hundred people, over 100 at least. Okay, put another timer up there. And for the sake of scope, let's say that this is the beginning of planning up to before walking down the aisle.
Oh, too late. We've already got a post party in here.
Oh, well, it's still got to be planned. Yeah, that's perfectly right. I was just saying maybe we don't need to go into the details about walking down the aisle and saying I do and all that stuff. But no, yeah, good call.
We might have to decide if there's an aisle. In neither of my marriages was there an aisle, Joe.
Okay, similar to before. Let's start doing some of that affinity mapping. So just start shuffling things around. Thanks, Ali.
I like the sticky that says, ask the partner to marry you.
Details. Yeah,
Good
that's
thought.
that's
Good
one of
thought,
those
whoever
ones that
came up with
falls
that one.
into the clear or obvious category and is often forgotten.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Ref Kneffen.
Now, I can remember when I was planning my wedding and I was expecting my kids, I operated in work weeks, but I never managed to throw anything up in the Kneffen frame. I got working in work weeks was too businessy as it was.
Maybe we should put this one up in the start of things.
We're going to be looking at location, efficiency. Ceremony. And I'm just spitballing on the backbone here. All right, so we've got some of that affinity mapping going like before. Start bringing them over to the right. And if there's a epic that we need to add or change, easy enough to do.
Oh, come on. Never an easy way to copy this thing. Joe, what's the cheat for copy? Copy an item.
If you're not in the item, so like where you can type immediately in it,
Yeah.
you can right click it and you should be able to copy paste from there.
Tried it, didn't happen.
Which one are you trying to do that to?
I was just trying to copy one of these epic headers. So I go copy, come over, and there's no paste for it.
Well, where are you thinking about putting it?
To the left of location. I was just trying to copy the location one and duplicate. That'll work. There we go.
Yeah. And another Miro shortcut, if you are typing stickies and you reach the end of what you're typing in a sticky, if you hit tab, it'll automatically create a new one.
That's useful to know. Actually, it didn't create a new one. It jumps to the next existing one.
Looks like everything is over on the board. Thanks, Gabriel. All right. So when I was plotting out this activity, I did the 3 levels again. And for the middle one, I said an intimate affair, maybe 40 closest friends and family, only 2 witnesses, etc., and 1 month to plan. As I've seen these go up, because it's been a long time since I planned a wedding, I don't know that a whole lot is going to change. But we can kind of consider that, see what, with a month of planning, what you think really begins to happen, what might come below the line. I've seen weddings by Evite, but I've never seen one by Meetup.
Yes, you have to pay to attend the wedding.
I'll make a suggestion here. And if you've got a month to plan, I don't know if you're really going to get much catering. You might be starting to look at potluck.
Or Costco.
Costco. Hey, it's roasted chicken again and pizza. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Again, you start to see those differentiators. Now, the last one is pretty extreme. Eloping. It's about as small as you can get it at that point. I mean, time and time of year are, well, no, you might be able to plan it a little bit ahead. It's not necessarily tonight.
I think at that point, you just need the very first one, the obvious. You ask the partner and that's it, you're done.
You have to find a destination, so a venue. It might be
Vegas?
Las Vegas, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to-
Vegas, City Hall.
You
You
may
have to
need
find an
somebody
officiator.
to actually write the paperwork.
Yeah. Here in Portland, we've got the Church of, I think the Church of Elvis is still around.
Oh,
Might
right,
not
we
be.
missed the health checks.
And we also missed the music plan.
Good call. Also the photographer.
Well, if the guests come, they can take pictures on their phones, make a collaborative album, and you always have Spotify for music. Just look up a wedding playlist.
It's gonna be a drum circle.
Oh, a drum circle in the woods.
Thanks, Robert. I think a drum circle in the wood is more Seattle than.
I think you'd find some Californians who would be happy to do that.
Oh yeah, the some of those Bay Area folks.
Yeah, the Berkeley folks,
Mm-hmm.
the Burning Man folks. Definitely.
Okay. All right. So you again, you start to get a sense of how the decision making occurs to get down to that MVP. Again, you're trying to, in the ideal sense, we're putting something out there that we can get feedback on or create value. And if we're focused on value, we're trying to do it in as small increments and short increments as possible. So making those judgment calls, pulling, there might be a feature in there that's a VP's. I was going to say hi, Karen. It's been a while, but yes. how do we start making those judgment calls? Who do we piss off? Who do we have to keep happy? All of the, the politics that go on in this. And it's going to be a very similar process over and over again, hopefully. I don't, any other examples that we do are going to be pretty similar. I'm happy to move up to another one, but I'll leave it up to the group. Or I'll leave it up to our moderators.
I think both of those were fun, but I think we've all got the idea. And I think that was an exceptional way of getting us the idea.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this practice as many times. I don't get to do it as often as I would like, but it's always pretty good, especially if we get a pretty good sized audience with some good collaboration and participation. I've been in environments before where the product owner didn't want to open it up to a different audience. They didn't want that kind of visibility, things like that. So, again, part of the politics of the process, but yeah, I've had some pretty good success with these before. Any other questions that I can answer for anybody? Okay. Well, Ron and Rob, I don't know how you feel about sharing LinkedIn profiles, but if that's okay, we can start throwing our profiles up on the board.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And anyone have any announcements? Anyone looking for jobs? Anyone have jobs? All of those kinds of things are open to all of you right now.
I'm Jim. I help to run the Job Hackers. Once a quarter, we teach a 6-week course on Agile practices and covering a lot of different topics, not just what is Scrum and Kanban, but all kinds of things. A lot of people, including Mary, have taken the course, and Karen's also taken it a couple of times. If you're not necessarily interested in the course itself, we also have a Friday discussion session every Friday during the course. And there we pick apart a real world scenario. It's fictitious, but it's represents the kinds of problems you run into in the real world. And there's almost every time we've got a new case to talk about. So that's pretty cool. Registration's open now. Our next course starts on Tuesday. So if you're interested,
forward to it. Yeah, Jim.
URLs, Jim, for the
I'm going to drop
course.
it in.
And you've got a is it a monthly meetup?
That's correct. It's the last Tuesday of each month, and if you go to
often a very good meetup.
Yeah, especially when you're speaking.
I was going to say that, but I thought I would.
Oh, and by the way, it's free.
Free is good.
The best course that money can't buy.
The best course you don't need money for. Pretty awesome. Job hackers are pretty cool. Any other announcements, wishes?
Well, I'll go ahead and toss that out there that I'm looking for a different job. So I am employed, so it's not urgent, but.
And what are you looking for, Joe?
Scrum Master, Agile coach, TPM, things like that.
Great. Anyone else?
Contract or full-time?
Preference for full-time.
And location?
Portland, remote, or other locations that might just sound really cool to go to.
So not necessarily a filter.
Yeah.
Good.
Sometimes it's more about what I filter out rather than what I filter in.
Very cool. Others?
You mind if I follow up with a question to Joe?
Go ahead.
So, Joe, it looks like you were passively looking. You've been passively looking. How is the job market based on your personal,
It's tough.
experience?
It's tough out there right now. If you look at the LinkedIn counter, almost everything is automatically over 100 applicants. I'm usually not getting callbacks. So it's tough. I'm right by Intel. They just announced another 15,000. I don't know how many of those are from their software or IT teams, but you have the big companies that are putting more applicants into the pool right now.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone here will hire you when we have a job.
Well, just to wrap, thank you. I was a high school teacher for a few years, and I really enjoy teaching and facilitating. So this has been a pleasure for me.
Awesome. Thank you
Thanks.
so much, Joe, for doing this. And any final comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It was really a wonderful session, and it was very interactive too. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
And we'll see you all we'll see some of you anyway in January.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks everyone
Thank
for
you.
participating.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Yeah.